Everybody thinks they understand what a boss is. They don't. They picture commands. They picture violence. They picture control. A real boss doesn't look busy, doesn't look angry, doesn't look hungry. If you can see a boss working, you're already too late. A boss isn't the top of the pyramid. He's the weight holding it down. Every problem rolls uphill. Every mistake lands near him. Every favor has his shadow on it. Most guys don't fail trying to become boss. They fail misunderstanding what it costs after. Let's break it down. Level 1, the placeholder boss. This is the boss on paper, the title holder, the guy who inherited the seat too early. People still test him, still bypass him, still check elsewhere for confirmation. The first kind of boss isn't chosen, he's installed. He sits in the chair because somebody had to, because the seat couldn't stay empty, because chaos was worse than compromise. This boss doesn't rise, he arrives, sometimes through blood, sometimes through timing, sometimes because nobody else wanted the heat yet. He knows the rules, knows the faces, knows the history, but knowledge isn't authority, and everybody in the room knows it. He talks early in meetings, fills silence that wasn't meant to be filled, repeats decisions like they might dissolve, if not reinforced. He mistakes activity for control. That's his first mistake. Real authority doesn't move fast. It settles. The placeholder boss watches everyone too closely because he's waiting for something to slip. And when nothing does, he gets nervous. Guys still nod, still show respect, still bring envelopes, but they check elsewhere for confirmation. That's how you know. Power doesn't echo, it lands. This boss leans on rules instead of consequence. He reminds people how things are supposed to work, but the street doesn't respond to reminders. It responds to memory. Who paid when it hurt? Who stayed quiet when it mattered? Who absorbed damage without complaining? The placeholder boss hasn't built that yet, so he borrows it from the past, from names bigger than his, from ghosts in the room, and ghosts don't protect anybody. This boss survives on tolerance, not loyalty, not fear, just tolerance. Everyone agrees, for now. That's the most dangerous phrase in the life, because for now has an expiration date when pressure comes, and it always does. This boss freezes, not because he's weak, because he was never meant to decide under fire. He was meant to hold the seat until someone else proved they could sit in it. That's why placeholder bosses don't fall loudly. They get replaced politely. Meetings change. Calls stop coming first. Decisions get made without them. Nobody challenges them. They just stop mattering. That's level 1. A boss in name. A steward of someone else's future. And every real boss remembers watching one of these disappear without ever seeing the moment it happened. Level 2, the enforcer boss. The second kind of boss doesn't inherit the seat. He takes control of the room, not with paperwork, not with history, with consequences. This boss comes up when things are already shaky, when tolerance runs thin, when people are tired of guessing who's in charge. He doesn't talk much at first. He lets a situation get ugly, then fixes it once, publicly. That's the introduction. Nobody forgets it. At this level, respect is immediate, because fear moves faster than trust ever will. Guys straighten up, voices drop, problems disappear overnight. From the outside, it looks like leadership. From the inside, it's pressure. The enforcer boss believes one thing above all else. If they're scared enough, they won't challenge me. That's true. For a while. This boss handles every issue personally. He doesn't delegate trouble. He owns it. Late payment, he shows up. Disrespect, he handles it. Internal beef, he shuts it down hard and early. The crew feels protected and trapped, because now every problem carries risk, and risk makes people quiet. Too quiet. That's where the cracks start. Guys stop bringing him small problems, because small problems turn into big reactions. They start fixing things themselves, covering mistakes, delaying bad news. Fear doesn't eliminate problems, it hides them, and hidden problems rot. The enforcer boss doesn't notice at first. Why would he? Everything looks clean. Envelopes are thick. Meetings are calm. But calm doesn't mean stable. It means nobody wants to be the one standing in front of him when something goes wrong. This boss mistakes silence for order. That's his blind spot. He's respected, but he's not trusted. And trust is what tells you the truth early. At this level, loyalty is shallow. People stay in line because it's safer than leaving. But safety isn't devotion, it's calculation. The enforcer boss starts believing his reputation will carry him. It won't, because fear has a shelf life. New guys don't scare as easily. Older guys get tired of walking on glass. And smart guys start looking for buffers. Intermediaries appear. Messages get filtered. Distance grows. Not against him, around him. This boss starts feeling isolated. He doesn't know why. People still show respect, still say the right things, still pay. But the warmth is gone. He responds the only way he knows how. That's exhausting. And exhaustion makes mistakes sloppy. At some point, this boss has to choose. Either evolve or become the reason someone else rises. Because fear can clear a room, but it can't build a structure. And bosses who don't transition out of enforcement never make it past this level. They don't get taken out. They get outgrown. Quietly. More pressure, more enforcement, more reminders of who he is. That accelerates the decay. Because every time fear is reapplied, it teaches people to work around you, not with you. The enforcer boss doesn't fall fast. He wears himself down, handling everything, touching everything, being the final word on every problem. Level 3, the earning boss. This is where things get dangerous. Not loud dangerous, not violent dangerous, quiet dangerous. The earning boss doesn't need to remind anyone who he is. The numbers do that for him. Money moves steady now. Not spiky, not desperate, predictable. Envelopes show up on time. Short when they should be short. Heavy when they're supposed to be heavy. No explanations attached. That's power. At this level, the boss doesn't chase people. He doesn't threaten. He doesn't lean. He waits. Because people who owe money always come back on their own. The crew feels solid, confident, professional. They start believing they're part of something real. And they are. That's the trap. The earning boss starts hearing compliments he didn't ask for. Clean operation. Good structure. Smart guy. Those aren't compliments. They're measurements. Because money doesn't just attract opportunity. It attracts attention. And attention attracts pressure. Other crews notice the consistency. They don't see the work. They see the outcome. They start wondering, where's that action coming from? Who's backing it? How clean is it, really? Nobody accuses. They don't need to. Suspicion does the work. At this level, jealousy doesn't come loud. It comes polite. Smiles linger too long. Advice shows up uninvited. People start offering help you didn't ask for. That's not support. That's surveillance. The earning boss feels it before he understands it. Meetings tighten. Rules get enforced harder. Mistakes that used to slide don't anymore. Not because he's doing wrong, because he's doing right. Big earners get watched. This is where inexperienced bosses get reckless. They push harder, expand faster, chase bigger numbers. They think earning protects them. But here's the pressure nobody talks about. The crew starts changing. Guys feel untouchable. They stretch deals, talk looser, take shortcuts. They forget the money isn't theirs. It's borrowed credibility. The earning boss now has a new job. Thought he doesn't. Earning exposes you. The smarter earning boss does the opposite. He slows growth, limits visibility, keeps the operation boring. He understands something critical. Flash is suspicion. Silence is safety. Not building rackets, controlling behavior. Because one loud earner can undo months of quiet consistency. This is where leadership becomes discipline, not punishment, not fear, correction, once. After that, consequences. The earning boss learns restraint here. He learns that being impressive is more dangerous than being effective. He lets other crews think they're bigger. Let other bosses look flashier. He stays invisible while winning. Because the ones who last aren't the biggest earners. They're the ones who never make anyone nervous. This level decides everything. If the boss learns to manage perception, he moves up. If he doesn't, this is where his rise stalls, or starts collapsing without him noticing. Because at level 3, you're no longer proving you can earn. You're proving you can survive success. And most guys can't. Level 4, the buffer boss. By the time a boss reaches this level, he's tired. Not weak, not scared. Tired of noise. He's learned that being reachable is expensive. Every call pulls him into something. Every meeting costs attention. So he builds space, buffers. Capos handle crews. Lieutenants handle problems. Messengers carry words, so his voice doesn't have to. That's smart. At first, the buffer boss believes distance equals safety, and it does. From heat, from chaos, from constant interference, he's harder to reach now. And that alone feels like power. People hesitate before approaching him. Problems don't land as often. Decisions move through channels. The system looks clean. But here's what buffering really does. It changes the timing of truth. Bad news doesn't disappear. It just arrives late, filtered, softened, packaged to be less disruptive. Nobody wants to be the guy who brings trouble directly to the boss anymore. Not because they're scared, but because they're respectful. That's worse, because respect edits reality. At this level, the boss stops feeling problems early. He hears about them once they're already expensive. The buffer boss starts trusting the structure more than his instincts. That's the danger. Because structures don't feel pressure. People do. And people lie when pressure builds. The boss notices subtle shifts. Meetings feel smoother. Too smooth. Fewer arguments. Fewer surprises. That doesn't mean things are better. It means someone else is absorbing the damage. Capos start making decisions without checking in. Not out of rebellion, out of efficiency. They're solving problems before the boss even knows they existed. That sounds good. Until you realize the boss is no longer shaping outcomes. He's approving them after the fact. That's how control starts slipping. Not all at once, but piece by piece. The buffer boss believes he's above the street now. He isn't. He's just further from it. And distance dulls awareness. He starts relying on reports, on numbers, on summaries. But summaries lie. They don't show tension. They don't show resentment. They don't show fear. They show outcomes. By the time outcomes look bad, the causes are already gone. At this level, the boss has to choose. Break the buffer occasionally. Step back into the mess. Feel the temperature himself. Or trust the machine completely. Most choose the machine. It feels cleaner, safer, more dignified. But machines decay quietly. And when something finally breaks through the buffer, it's never small. It's a crisis. And crises at this level don't give warnings. They just arrive. The bosses who survive level 4 learn to rotate distance. They stay unreachable, but not invisible. They listen through people, but still watch the room themselves. The ones who don't, they become legends who lost touch. Not because they got soft, because they got insulated. And insulation doesn't protect power. It erodes it. Level 5, the political boss. At this level, the boss stops reacting. He anticipates. He's learned that force creates resistance. Pressure creates fractures. And fractures spread. So he changes tactics. The political boss doesn't win arguments. He wins position. He doesn't say no outright. He lets time do the work. He doesn't threaten. He waits for the other guy to overplay his hand. That's how politics works in this life. You don't crush people. You let them expose themselves. At this level, conversations become indirect. Nothing is said straight. Everything is implied. A look replaces a warning. A pause replaces a decision. Silence becomes an answer. The political boss understands something younger bosses don't. The loudest move is often the weakest one. So he stays quiet. He listens more than he talks. He asks questions he already knows the answer to. He lets other people explain themselves into corners. This boss builds alliances that don't look like alliances. No handshakes, no promises spoken aloud. Just mutual convenience. You don't owe him, but you don't cross him either. Because crossing him doesn't bring immediate consequences. It brings long-term inconvenience. Things slow down. Doors stop opening. Support disappears quietly. That's power without fingerprints. At this level, favors become currency, but not the kind you track on paper, the kind you remember forever. Who backed who during a dispute? Who stayed neutral when neutrality mattered? Who rushed to take a side too early? The political boss never forgets that. He doesn't punish quickly. He collects information, because information lets him move without ever appearing to move. But politics have a cost. Balance requires attention. One missed slight, one unpaid favor, one alliance taken for granted, and the room shifts, not dramatically, subtly. The political boss starts feeling pressure from all sides. Everyone wants reassurance. Everyone wants priority. Everyone wants to know where they stand. And that's dangerous, because the moment you clarify positions, you create enemies. So the political boss delays clarity. He stays ambiguous, unavailable, non-committal. That works until people get tired of guessing. This is where smart bosses get tested. If he leans too far into politics, he starts looking slippery, unreliable, unclear. People stop trusting his word because they don't know what it means anymore. Politics without credibility turn into suspicion, and suspicion kills influence. The political boss who survives this level does one thing consistently. He balances invisibility with certainty. When he finally speaks, the room locks in. No debate, no confusion, because silence means nothing unless words still carry weight. The bosses who fail here don't fall violently. They get isolated. Allies drift. Neutral parties disengage. Nobody wants to be tied too closely to someone whose position is always shifting. Politics are powerful, but they're fragile. At level 5, the boss learns this hard truth. You can't live in politics forever. Eventually, you have to decide. And once you do, everything that was hidden steps into the light. Level 6, the distant boss. At this level, the boss becomes hard to see. Not because he's hiding, because he doesn't need to be looked at anymore. His name carries farther than his body. His preferences get discussed without him present. Decisions get made because that's how he likes it, even when nobody's checked. That's distance. And distance feels like freedom at first. No constant calls, no emergency meetings, no small problems landing in his lap. The distant boss has earned this space. He's survived pressure. He's built structure. He's proven he doesn't need to touch everything. But here's what distance really does. It turns a man into an interpretation. People start guessing instead of asking. They start filling in blanks. They start acting on what they think he wants. That's powerful and dangerous because interpretations multiply. One guy hears, "The boss likes it clean." Another hears, "Don't bring him anything risky." A third hears, "Handle it yourself and don't bother him." All three believe they're doing the right thing. None of them are lying. They're just acting without alignment. The distant boss notices fewer interruptions, but he also notices fewer surprises. That should worry him. Surprises are information. They tell you where tension is building. They show you what's breaking underneath. Silence hides all of that. At this level, the boss receives reports, summaries, numbers. But numbers don't show attitude. They don't show resentment. They don't show ambition. They show outcomes. And outcomes arrive after decisions have already been made. This is where myths start forming. Some guys believe the boss is untouchable. Others believe he's out of the loop. A few start wondering what would happen if they acted without waiting. Nobody challenges him directly. Why would they? Distance makes confrontation impractical. But distance also makes testing easier. Small tests at first, tiny deviations, a decision made without checking in, nothing dramatic, just enough to see if anything happens. If the boss responds too slowly, the test gets bigger next time. That's not betrayal. That's curiosity. The distant boss feels something slipping, but he can't put his finger on it because nothing's wrong. Yet, the structure is still intact. The rackets still hum. The money still moves. But control has shifted from presence to assumption, and assumptions don't hold under pressure. This is where smart bosses reappear, not loudly, not dramatically. They break distance on purpose. They show up unexpectedly, ask questions that don't sound important, watch reactions more than answers. They remind the room that distance doesn't mean absence. The bosses who don't do this fade into symbol, and symbols get challenged. Not out of hatred, out of curiosity. Because when power becomes abstract, people want to see if it's real. Level 6 doesn't end with a coup. It ends with erosion. Slow, quiet, unannounced. By the time the boss realizes he's no longer the first reference point, he's already late. The distant boss survives only if he understands this. Distance is a tool, not a lifestyle. Used too long, it stops protecting you and starts rewriting you. Level 7. The Kingmaker. By the time a boss reaches this level, he doesn't run anything directly anymore. He decides who runs things. That's the difference. The Kingmaker isn't visible. He's referenced. His name doesn't come up in arguments. It comes up at the end of them. Not as a threat, as a fact. At this level, the boss stops issuing orders. He starts shaping outcomes before decisions are made. He doesn't pick sides loudly. He lets others reveal themselves first. Who rushes for power? Who waits? Who panics when attention turns their way? The Kingmaker watches all of it, because ambition tells you more than loyalty ever will. This boss understands something most never reach. Direct power attracts resistance. Indirect power attracts dependency, so he stays indirect. When a capo rises, it's not because the boss announced it. It's because the boss didn't object. When someone falls, it's not because the boss removed them. It's because support quietly evaporated. The Kingmaker doesn't swing hammers. He adjusts gravity. At this level, people compete for his silence. They want to know, am I safe? Am I chosen? Am I next? He never answers those questions, because certainty creates complacency, and complacency creates weakness. The Kingmaker keeps everyone slightly unsure, not scared, aware. That's the balance. He settles disputes without being present. He resolves conflicts through intermediaries who don't even realize they're carrying final decisions. He doesn't micromanage. He selects who gets resources, who gets patience, who gets time, and who doesn't. This is where power becomes lonely, because nobody around him is a peer anymore. Everyone has an angle. Everyone has an interest. Everyone is measuring how close they are. The Kingmaker can't relax, can't vent, can't confide, because every word has consequence. At this level, the boss isn't afraid of betrayal. He's afraid of misjudgment, choosing the wrong successor, backing the wrong temperament, misreading ambition as loyalty. That's the real danger, because once you're a Kingmaker, you're judged not by what you do, but by who you empower. One bad choice echoes for years. This boss starts thinking long-term, past money, past rackets. He thinks about stability, who can hold things together without him, who understands restraint, who knows when not to act. That's what he's really looking for. Not strength, not fear, not hunger, control. The Kingmaker doesn't want the strongest man in the room. He wants the one who won't burn it down just to feel important. Very few bosses make it here, and fewer stay. Because once you stop ruling and start deciding who rules, everyone's watching for signs of decline. The moment the Kingmaker looks tired, or distracted, or disconnected, people start planning for the next one. That's the final truth of power. There is no finish line, only transitions. And the highest form of control is knowing when to step back before the room decides for you. That's level 7, not dominance, legacy. Every boss thinks the climb is the hard part. It isn't. The hard part is knowing when the climb is over, because power doesn't end with defeat. It ends with misreading the moment. Most bosses don't fall because they're weak. They fall because they stay visible too long, because they confuse relevance with presence, because they forget that control works best when it's quiet. At the highest levels, nothing dramatic happens. No gunshots, no headlines, no warnings, just a shift. People stop checking first. Decisions start getting made elsewhere. and the room moves on without saying goodbye. That's the real ending. The bosses who last understand one thing. You don't win by holding the seat forever. You win by knowing when to stop sitting in it. Because in this life, power doesn't belong to the loudest man, or the strongest, or even the smartest. It belongs to the one who knows when to disappear before the room decides he should. That's the cost of being boss. And that's why very few ever are.